So if you take a look at the dollar bill, you notice a couple of things about it. But the most prominent thing we want to look at here is that our current money is a Federal Reserve note. Basically, the value of this dollar is guaranteed by this institution called the Federal Reserve. It used to be able to get a dollar of gold or dollar of silver from these Federal Reserve notes. Now our dollar is worth whatever you can get for it. So it's worth a pencil, or it's worth a bottle of water, or it's worth a soda, whatever it is. And the value of it is regulated by this institution here called the Federal Reserve, which basically acts as our national bank of the United States. Alexander Hamilton's idea. So with that in mind, thinking about the national bank and money, in the 1830s, there was a war over the existence of the national bank. Again, going back to that constitutional principle about should it exist, should it not, and the philosophical issue about banks and whether or not they were good for the country. Jacksonian Democrats mostly distrusted banks. One of the reasons they claimed was because they made money, but they didn't appear to make a product. To Jackson, that didn't make any sense. Well, how can someone make money with other people's money? There must be something shady going on here. So he distrusted it from that kind of a standpoint. Also, the experience of Jackson and a lot of other Southerners and a lot of other Westerners were that banks often foreclosed on farmers. Farmers had to take out loans to buy land, and sometimes they had bad crops or bad harvests, and they couldn't make their loan payments, and a lot of times banks would foreclose on the farm and take it from them. So banks weren't really seen as trustworthy institutions. A lot of times frontier banks too, people would set up a bank and claim it was a bank, and people would deposit money, and then the bank would close a week later, and people would run away. So Jacksonian Democrats really distrusted banks and corporations in general, the things that didn't appear to make a product but still made money. So in 1832, the national bank was a topic of conversation. Henry Clay and the bank's president, Nicholas Biddle, wanted to make the national bank a campaign issue in the election of 1832. The bank wasn't actually up for recharter until 1836, but Henry Clay convinced Congress to put together a bill to recharter the bank in 1832, knowing that Andrew Jackson is going to veto that bill. Jackson was afraid it was going to use campaign funds its funds against him in his campaign, and he generally distrusted it, as I said. So he vetoes the recharter bill. Nicholas Biddle and Henry Clay make this an issue in the election of 1832, and Henry Clay, who's running for president on the side of the Whigs, points out that Andrew Jackson vetoed the national bank, and how could he do that? And look what happened when the bank went away in 1812, etc. Well, there were enough people in the United States that agreed with Jackson that they reelected him, and the Congress upholds never recharters the bank, and the veto stands, and in 1836 the national bank closed. In the meantime, between the bank closing and the bank closing and the veto of the bill, Jackson starts putting money into these small banks run by his supporters in the South. These banks start to give out way too many loans, and then in 1836 the national bank closes. This creates a situation where there's way too much money out there for people to get their hands on, and when there's way too much money out there, the value of that money goes way, 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 way down, meaning the prices of things go way, 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 way up. And this creates a really bad economic situation. In addition to Jackson putting these funds in small banks, he also started requiring that people buy land, federal lands in the West, only with gold or silver. He calls this the specie circular, meaning you needed specie or gold or silver, which is hard money, to buy land from the federal government. Well, there were a whole bunch of people that had speculated or bought land on credit that now couldn't sell it, and they were foreclosed on by banks, and other banks start foreclosing on farms, and there's no institution to regulate the bank's behaviors, and they start closing, and people are losing deposits. And by 1837, we get a huge panic and financial depression, and it is actually the worst financial crisis in our nation's history. A lot of people talk about the Great Depression or the recession of 2008. But 1837 was a way, way, way worse situation, because there was no institution to try to help get people out of this financial crisis and panic. and it was a huge mess created really by Andrew Jackson and the Democrats. Unfortunately, Martin Van Buren is blamed for this because he's president in 1837 when it happens. But the result of all this is that the Jacksonian Democrats become stronger supporters of agriculture because banks are bad and they caused this depression, and this really was all the fault of industry and all that. So they become stronger supporters of agriculture. It also means they become stronger defenders of slavery. And so the Jacksonian Democrats and the Van Buren Democrats, they start to support expansion of slavery, expansion of agriculture further west. We need more slave states. We need more cotton growing because industry and banking and all those sorts of things are just too unreliable, and they cause this huge financial crisis. This cartoon here was used in the campaign of 1832 against Andrew Jackson, and the Whigs came up with it, and they called him King Andrew. And if we take a look at the text, he says, "Born to command of the veto, had I been commissioned King Andrew the First." Right, and we see these great sort of images in the background where half of the background is a throne, the other half is a president's desk. He's got a veto in one hand and a sort of an emperor's scepter in the other, wearing a crown, and he's trampling on the United States Constitution. And it says, "King Andrew the First, born to command, shall he reign over us, or shall the people rule?" And I think this is a great example, again, of that campaigning, but also sort of the different points of view on Andrew Jackson and who he was. Was he a powerful person? Absolutely. Did he use the power of the presidency to redefine it? Yes, he did. Did he go too far and step outside the bounds? That's open for interpretation. Again, as I said before, I really think that Andrew Jackson was a guy who looked at the Constitution and used the powers that were at his disposal to kind of get his agenda across. And he's the first person to do that. And that was something that was new. It was something that presidents didn't do before. So I think he got a lot of backlash from Congress and from some Americans, particularly the Whigs, who might have disagreed with his point of view from the South and on a strong central government, strong national government that really influenced policy. So Andrew Jackson, was he the first modern president? Yes, he was, but why? So Andrew Jackson was the first modern president because take a look at all those. And if you chose D, all the above, you are a genius. Okay, so just to summarize, the age of Jacksonian democracy included more opportunities for white men to vote with expansion of democracy. We had the development of two new political parties, the Democrats and the Whigs, and our second American party system. There was an increase in the power of the presidency, Andrew Jackson particularly using the veto to influence the kind of laws that Congress passed. And we see a serious division begin or continue to grow between the North and the South on many political issues. Slavery, tariffs, the power of the federal government to interfere in the states with the nullification crisis and the mail crisis. So overall, the age of Jacksonian democracy as defined by these things and the policies of Andrew Jackson. We're going to take a look at some of this in class tomorrow. We're going to look at some documents and some primary sources and try to get into, sort out, how democratic was this era and some of the things that I discussed. So thanks for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow in class.